Monkey. Monkey.
What is up? 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 Impromptu. I am back, y'all. I missed y'all. Ugh. If you watching this in the future, man, I'm your skinny deficient homie, Chubbington the third. My glasses are dirty as shit. But yeah, man, we're gonna do something a little bit different tonight. Let me get some stuff together though. Let's see who we got popping in. Okay. So I'm gonna shoot the shit a little bit, you know. Before I get started, I'm gonna shoot the shit a little bit. What y'all been up to? Ain't nobody in here right now yet, but for my people in the future, what's been up? I've been having a lot going on. But yeah, man, I decided I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna check out some MrBallen content. The homegirl put me on. Give me 1 second. Yeah, man. So let's see. Yeah, we doing some MrBallen today. I want to see how many people we can get up in here before we get started, because I really just want to check this shit the fuck out. I'm curious about how this is going to play out, honestly. If you are in the chat, go ahead and say what's up. Like I said, I am Chubbington the third, your skinny deficient homie. We just chilling. I feel like this light is super bright. Like super bright. I can't. Man. I want to start doing some stuff up on Wednesdays. I'm going to call it higher learning. Everybody going to smoke. We're going to watch some science stuff. Because I'm curious about what's going to happen in the science world. You know what I mean? Giggity schnickety goo. Okay, so let's see what we got coming to the table. Say hi to everybody who didn't popped up. Appreciate y'all stopping by. You're... So yeah, man, I'm just gonna chill for a little bit before we get started. Get ready to do a little opening for the YouTube video. Anybody that's up in there can say what up and whatnot. I'm happy to say hi with everybody, you know. Gonna wait until a couple people get up in here before I actually start doing some stuff. See, we got one person watching, which is probably just me. So I'm thinking I'm gonna check out some MrBallen. Oh, we got Crooklyn in the building, and we got Harley Q. You know, hi. I'm actually debating. Hold on, let me turn this sound down. I'm actually debating on whether or not I'm gonna switch up the format for this one. Normally, I'm up here in the background, whatnot. I think I might bring this mug to the forefront, like so. Why do I feel like I'm messing some stuff up? Yeah, I should have did that beforehand. I'll do that next time. But yeah, how everybody doing, man? What's up? How everybody doing today? Welcome, welcome. Appreciate y'all stopping through. We're going to get into some spooky shit, man. Some MrBallen, top 3 stories that sound fake but are 100% true. Oh, getting a little bit of love up on the Facebook side. Appreciate that. All right, well, I don't have anybody in here, but if some people pop up, hopefully you rewind and you see what I say now. But I'm going to get ready to start the recording going. So let me do this. Welcome back to the channel, y'all. It's been a minute. I'm your skinny deficient homie, Chubbington III. And if you found your way here, then the thumbnail enticed you. And I'm hoping that you like it. Today we checking out top 3 stories that sound fake but are 100% real by MrBallen. Now, shout out to the homegirl Casey, man, Miss Kitsune. She put me on to this, and I watched one of his videos and saw Arctic Kicks. Shout out to Arctic Kicks. Saw that he was doing it, and it's something I want to check out and try and move the channel a little bit different directions. You know what I mean? We still gonna do music. If you came here for music, you in the right place. Oh, the bell means y'all need to go ahead and hit that sub button and don't forget to like. But anyway, without further ado, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna get up into this. So it's MrBallen top 3, and honestly, I'm curious. I'm curious about this one. I am. I'm curious where this is gonna go. So without further ado, Buff Chubbians, let's react.
Sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction, and today we're going to look at 3 stories that demonstrate that. But before we get into those stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right channel because that's all we.
I'll say ahead of time, it's my first time doing a video like this, so I apologize if the music is loud or anything. Y'all just let me know in the comments. I'm going to watch it back, make some adjustments. And also, let me know if this is your first time hearing of MrBallen too, because I ain't never heard of him. It'll take you a second to pause and just let me know. I'm curious.
We do, and we upload 3, 4, even 5 times every week. So if that's of interest to you, please offer to take the like button out on your boat for a scuba diving trip. And once they get off the boat and they go underwater, just turn your boat around and head back to shore. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's stories.
I like his opening music. Man. It's spooky. You know what I mean? I kind of feel like maybe I should have the lights turned down, but I'm black. Y'all ain't gonna see me. Already got a black background, man. Like...
A 28-year-old Russian man named Artyom Sidorkin started having severe chest pains, and at first he tried to ignore it, but it got so bad he could barely stand up, and then he began coughing up blood, and so finally he went to the emergency room. When he got there, even before the doctors examined him or gave him an x-ray, just based on the way he presented to them, being pale in the face and hunched over and very sick looking, they assumed this must be something very serious. So that day they brought Mr. Sidorkin in for an examination, and after talking to him and hearing about all of his symptoms and just looking at him, the assumption was he probably has a tumor in his lungs. And so they sent him in for an x-ray, and afterwards the radiologist looked at the x-ray and confirmed that, yep, there is a mass growing inside of your lungs. And so before they went to just start removing huge pieces of his lung, they told him that they would like to do a biopsy where they remove a small piece of the tissue and test it to see if it's cancerous or not. And so Mr. Sidorkin is terrified, but he says, okay, he schedules his surgery. He goes in a couple days later, and the surgeon pulls out a piece of his lung tissue, and as it's sitting on the tray, he looks down at the tissue, the surgeon does, and he realizes there's something hidden inside of the tissue, as if the tissue was like an envelope holding something inside of it. And so he opened it up, and there, growing on the side of his lung, was a small fir tree. It was 5 centimeters long, it was green, it looked very lively, it was just a thriving little tree. The doctors believed Mr. Sidorkin, who was a botanist, had inhaled a seed of a fir tree, and it got lodged inside of his lung tissue. And then as it grew, its pine needles began piercing his blood capillaries, causing him to cough up blood. After the discovery of what was inside of his lung, a spokeswoman for the Royal Botanic Gardens in London said that it is possible for a seed to germinate.
Hey, man. That must have been some killer green, right? Just saying, man. It's growing in your lungs. That's crazy. My little cousin had something like that, man. Like, you outside when you young, in the 90s especially. Man, my little cousin took a seed and stuck it up his nose. Nobody knew that he stuck a seed up his nose. Nobody knew. So we go a couple of weeks, and then he started getting nosebleeds a lot. So my uncle had to take some tweezers and pull the seed out of his nose. It had started to sprout, so it had these like spikes on it. Oh man, the weirdest stuff. The human body, man, it's crazy. How can something grow inside you like that?
Inside of the dark, damp conditions inside of a lung, but it is unbelievably bizarre. When doctors informed Mr. Sidorkin that he did not have cancer, he had a tree, Mr. Sidorkin was shocked, and he said, I never got the sense that there was a tree growing inside of me.
Yeah,
but more than shocked, he was just relieved that he was cancer-free. There is a picture of this tree inside of his lung tissue, but it's a bit graphic, so if you want to see it, go ahead and Google tree and lung, and I'm sure you'll find it.
Here's the question, man. It's graphic, though. It's graphic. Y'all gonna have to Google it on your own. I might Google it and just not show y'all. I'm too curious. Hold on. Give me a second. I'm too curious. I'm too curious. Hold on. Let me just check real quick. Tree and lung. That's the first thing that pops up. I shouldn't have did that. I shouldn't have did that. I shouldn't have did that shit.
Growing up, Pauline Dakin always suspected that there was just something off about her family. And years later, she would find out she was right. In 1970, when she was...
Man, have you ever ran into a fir tree? I never had a sense that a tree was inside me. Right. You ever ran into a fir tree? Them things is sharp, man. Like, fuck. Oh, ugh.
Was 5 years old, her parents... Bit graphic, so if you want to see it, go ahead and Google tree and lung, and I'm sure you'll find it. Growing up, Pauline Dakin always suspected that there was just something off about her family. And years later, she would find out she was right. In 1970, when she was 5 years old, her parents, Ruth and Warren, separated. And to Pauline, it wasn't that much of a shock because her father, Warren, was a heavy drinker and he was extremely violent. But after they separated and Pauline, her mother, and brother had moved into another house on the other side of Vancouver, Canada, Pauline noticed her mom started to act really anxious all the time, but she never knew why. When Pauline was 9, her mother told her and her brother that they were going to go on a vacation to Winnipeg, which is 1,000 miles away from Vancouver. And so they loaded up the van, they hopped in, and they drove all the way to Winnipeg. And when they got out, they went inside their new vacation home, and Ruth informed her children that they were actually never going back to Vancouver. And when Pauline and her brother said, "Why? Dad's still back in Vancouver. I want to see Dad." But Pauline said, "Sorry kids, this is the way it has to be, and when you're old enough, I'll explain everything." Confused and sad, Pauline and her brother began starting a new life in Winnipeg. Over the next 4 years, Pauline never saw her father, and so she lost touch with him. But she started making a couple close friends in Winnipeg, and she was starting to feel like this was home. But right as she was starting to feel normal, her mother told her and her brother that they needed to move right now all over again. This time they were going to go all the way to New Brunswick, the far east side of Canada. Their mother made them swear they would tell no one about this move. But later that day, when Pauline was with her best friend Wendy, she let it slip that she was moving. And so when Ruth came to pick Pauline up from Wendy's house, the two girls had to affect these sort of breezy goodbyes to each other so that Pauline's mother wouldn't suspect anything. Once in New Brunswick, the family did put down roots and they stayed there for many years. But Pauline's mother still was just incredibly anxious and paranoid about something. The kids just had no idea what it was. Fast forward to 1988, when Pauline was 23 years old. She had moved 2 hours away from the family home in New Brunswick and was living with her boyfriend and was working as a reporter at a local newspaper.
She had a whole
During
life.
that time, her mother called her and said, "Hey, I'd like to meet you at a motel. I'm finally ready to tell you everything about your childhood." Pauline was really intrigued and excited. This was a conversation that was literally decades in the making. And so Pauline eagerly went to the motel. She saw her mother waiting outside, kind of pacing around, looking very anxious. And so she walks up to her mom and she waves and she's about to speak when her mother just looks up at her and puts her finger over her lips, telling her to be quiet. And then she jams an envelope into Pauline's hands. And on the envelope, it just says, "Don't say anything. Put your jewelry inside of this envelope. It's probably bugged. I will explain everything inside. Just please don't speak." And so now Pauline's really confused, but she did as she was told. She took her jewelry off, put it in the envelope, and gave it back to her mother. And then the two of them silently walked into the motel, into the room where Pauline's mother was staying. When they went inside, there was a man sitting in the middle of the room that Pauline immediately recognized. It was the reverend of their church when they used to live in Vancouver. His name was Stan Sears, and Pauline's mother had been his secretary the whole time they'd gone to that church. Pauline always knew her mother and Stan were close friends, and in fact had kept in touch after they left Vancouver and were in Winnipeg and then New Brunswick. In fact, Pauline remembers periodically seeing Stan show up in Winnipeg and New Brunswick to visit with Pauline's mother. So it was a surprise, but not a total shock when Pauline's mother confessed.
Okay, I want y'all to put in the comments right now. Do y'all think that they got kidnapped? You think she killed the dad? Or you think they was part of a cult or something? I am wondering if they killed the dad, because there's no way he didn't come looking for him. There's no way he didn't come looking for him. You know what I mean? Like, I think she killed the dad. I do. That's what I think happened.
To her that in fact she and Stan had fallen in love, and in fact they had had a secret relationship from the time they lived in Vancouver. But this revelation was nothing compared to what Pauline heard next. Her mother explained that the reason they had had to move so many times during her childhood was because Pauline's father, Warren, was actually a mobster and was a key member of an organized crime syndicate in Vancouver. Right after they separated, Pauline's mother found out she had a hit put on her head, because the mob now believed that the husband could not control her anymore, and she knew too much. Stan also found out that he had a hit on his head because Ruth discovered that the mob wanted to kill him too because they knew about their relationship. And then also, apparently Stan was counseling a man that was in his congregation that wound up being a mobster, and so the mob believed this man.
Bro, out of all the things that I thought that could have been, I did not think that that was going to be a mobster story. Of course you ain't trying to tell nobody where you are. They put a hit out on you and the preacher? And the preacher? And you humping the preacher? I mean, I don't know. Maybe he got a little bit of me in him. You know what I mean?
Had given up critical information to Stan, making him even more of a liability. At first, Stan said he didn't believe any of this, but when he found out the man he had been counseling had been assassinated, he knew it was true. They decided not to tell the police and instead go into hiding together because Pauline's mother knew what happened to families that snitched on the mob. They were made examples of. And so when Pauline and her family moved to Winnipeg and then to New Brunswick, Stan actually moved there as well in tandem, which is why Pauline had seen him periodically showing up at their house to visit with Pauline's mother. Pauline was understandably completely shocked, but at the same time, she was kind of happy to have some sort of explanation for all the strange things that had happened in her childhood. And so over the course of the next...
I'm in shock, but I'm kind of happy to know what's going on. So there may or may not be a hit on me and my now boyfriend, my brother, his possible girlfriend or boyfriend, who knows, you and this preacher. But I'm kind of happy now because I got closure. That, I'd be freaked the fuck out. I'd be freaked out. There ain't no way I'm going to be all calm about that shit. No way.
Several hours, Pauline sat in this motel room with her mother and Stan and asked them every question she could think of. And she discovered that whenever she came home from school and she found her mother furiously pulling all the food out of the fridge and the pantry, throwing it all away with no explanation, that was actually because they found out the mob had tried to poison them. Or the 6 different times Pauline was unenrolled from the school she was at and then moved to a different school across town, that was because there was a credible threat the mob had discovered where Pauline was going to school. And so by the end of the weekend, Pauline not only learned about this totally crazy past she had, but she also learned that she was still in danger. And so before
Yeah.
Pauline headed back home, she asked her mother and Stan what she should do to stay safe. And Pauline's mother said, well, that's actually the reason we called you here now, because after all these years, we were just tired of being in hiding. And so we've already spoken to the authorities, and they've moved us into a special witness protection program for families connected to the mob. When you enter this program, it's referred to as entering the weird world, where basically you're not really safe, but you have agents that follow you around that are undercover, that track what you're doing and make sure there's no assassination attempt on you. And before Pauline could even ask, her mother told her that as a measure of her and Stan entering the weird world, they asked that a couple of agents monitor Pauline and her brother, even though they didn't know they were being monitored. At this point, Stan reached forward with a radio and he said, here's a radio that actually broadcasts to the agents that are following you pretty much all the time. But you should only use it if you're truly in a desperate situation, because as soon as you call out for help, there are going to be people that are risking their lives to come save you. As Pauline is holding this radio, she looks at her mom and Stan and she says, well, what happened to Dad? Is he in jail? And at this point, Pauline's mother says, no, he's not. He's in the weird world too. And she handed Pauline a letter that was from her father addressed to Pauline. And it basically spelled out that he had been moved into the weird world and he was looking forward to Pauline joining them at some point when she was ready. So now Pauline has this radio and this letter, and she's looking at her mother and Stan, and she's just totally overwhelmed. And her mother just tells her, go home, think about what you want to do next, and if you want to join the witness protection program and join the weird world with us, just let me know and we'll make it happen. And so Pauline, who's in a total state of shock, gives her mom a hug and gives Stan a hug and says, okay, bye, I'll be in touch. And she leaves the motel and she gets in her car and she's about to back up when she looks and sees Stan running outside holding something in his hand. And so Pauline stops, Stan runs up to the window, and he says, hey, I forgot to give you this. And he held up this round piece of metal that he told her was a GPS transponder. It was magnetized, and she should put it out of sight underneath her car. And what it does is it constantly gives off her location to the agents that are following her. So if she was in trouble, it would be easier for them to find her. And so Pauline thanked him, put the transponder under her car,
crazy,
and Stan went back to the
man.
motel.
See, that's crazy. That's crazy. Like, you would really have to, like, yeah, you could die. Yeah, they tried to poison your food. Yeah, they've been hunting us for 22 years, or what, she was 8 when they left, I think. So she's 22 now. Some quick math, 14. I was 14, and we've been running we was running for 8 years. That's crazy. Oh no, we've been running for 14 years. I was 8 years old.
Pauline went back home with the intention of just digesting this information, knowing that she was being watched, she had this radio, she was, relatively safe, and her plan was to just give it a couple of days before she committed to joining the witness protection program and joining the weird world. But after only a couple of days, her paranoia was so high that she dumped her boyfriend, she quit her job, and she moved out of her house into a separate apartment, and she called her mother and said, I can't take it anymore, I feel totally unsafe, I want to join the weird world. Her mother and Stan were delighted at her decision, but they told her it wasn't a simple process getting into the weird world, that a lot of people were involved in her basically giving up her old life and entering this new one. And so Pauline's mother told her that she would be in touch with one of her agents and they would contact Pauline when it was time for her to go. And so anxious and scared, Pauline began to wait and wait and wait. And her mother said, oh, just give it some time, they'll be in touch soon. But the waiting dragged on for 5 years. And in that time, Pauline met a new boyfriend, Kevin, who became her husband. And in conversations with him, Pauline started to doubt this whole mafia thing was even true. And so she decided, in order to find out if this really was a real thing, that the mafia was actually after them, that Pauline would need to set up a sting operation on her mother and Stan. And so Pauline called her mother and very convincingly told her that, oh my goodness, someone just broke into my apartment. I think it was someone from the mafia. I don't know what happened, but can you tell me what to do? Should I call the police? What do I do? And her mother said, no, don't call the police. Whatever you do, don't call the police. I'm going to get in touch with Stan and see if he knows what to do. And just a couple of minutes later, Pauline's mother called back and said, okay, honey, I spoke to Stan and he spoke to the undercover agents.
That's suspicious. That's suspicious. That's real suspicious, man.
That sit outside your house and have been watching you for all these years. And they said that, yes, unfortunately, not one, but 2 men from the mafia broke into your house today. But luckily, they went up, they grabbed them, they're in custody, so you're safe now. And Pauline said, Mom, I made that up.
Bro, do you know how childish that is? Like what if she had a stalker and you just told her, oh, it's fine, it got taken care of. And now this stalker is just free to come. What are you hiding? What is she hiding? What do you think the mom is hiding? What are you hiding? Okay.
Up. No one's been in my apartment. I've been here the whole day. I lied to you. No one broke in. And it was at this point that Pauline realized her mother and Stan had been living a lie since she was 5 years old. There was no mafia.
Okay.
Her father was not a mobster in some Vancouver crime syndicate. It was all made up. It would turn out Stan was suffering from something called delusion syndrome, where totally normal people that are totally lucid and have normal lives have one distinct delusion. And sometimes that delusion is not a big deal. But sometimes it is, like they believe the mafia is after them. And during his relationship with Pauline's mother, he passed on his delusion to her through something called folie à deux, which translates to madness for two, which is shared delusion syndrome, where someone who's delusional, who's a dominant personality, can pass that on to a subordinate personality. After confronting her mother and then also confronting Stan at a later date, neither of them said, "This is a lie, you're right."
Bro, all I keep on thinking about is that preacher must have been giving her the holy D. He got you convinced that the mafia is trying to kill. How good was the D? You weren't thinking right at all. What? He convinced her? He convinced her? He passed it off? Folie à deux? Man, y'all tell me what y'all think down in the comments, man. I don't know about that. I don't know about that. I really don't.
Right, you caught us, because they believed it, and they took to their graves the belief that the mafia was after them. Their biggest concern after Pauline said this isn't true was not that they had been exposed as potential frauds. It was that, oh no, Pauline's gonna expose herself to the mafia because she's not using her GPS transponder or her radio or living in the weird world with us. She's gonna get assassinated by the mafia. And so even though Pauline never got an apology from her mother or got to really talk about the insanity of this whole situation, because again, her mother and Stan took to the graves the belief that the mafia was in fact after them, Pauline ultimately made peace with the situation by writing a best-selling memoir called Run, Hide, Repeat. It is linked in the description below. Check it out.
Hey, I made the best of the situation by writing a best-selling novel that got me buku money. Yeah, that could pay for all the therapy. Like, I'm pretty good. What? This is crazy, man.
In November of 2004, 52-year-old Peter Porco and his wife, 54-year-old Joan Porco, were like so many other middle-aged, middle-class Americans. They lived in Del Mar, New York, in a comfortable two-story home, and they worked for a living. Peter was an appellate court clerk, and Joan was a speech pathologist. They had been married for over 30 years, and they had 2 sons. Christopher was a 21-year-old student at the University of Rochester, and his brother, Jonathan...
Bro, he the killer. He the killer. He the killer. Y'all looking at this? Hold on. I want y'all to see this. I want y'all to see this. Now, I want y'all to look at this picture and tell me who the killer is. I wonder which one is the killer. I wonder I wonder which one is the killer. That's... Hey, if you ain't the killer, I'm sorry, man. But you creepy as fuck, bro. I apologize. Them eyes, though, dog. There ain't no soul between them eyes.
Jonathan was a 23-year-old naval officer stationed at a submarine base in Groton, Connecticut. On Monday, November 15th, 2004, Peter woke up to start his typical Monday morning work routine.
That's the thing, too. Crooklyn, man. Like, honestly... As far as the other one we just talked about, the mobster, you ain't never seen a mobster. You ain't never been chased down. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. Seeing is believing, and she was smart to test that. And this is before the internet too, I would think.
He got up, he got out of bed, he went into the bathroom, he relieved himself, he looked in the mirror, he shaved,
He got a strong
dressed in his
killer
work
face.
clothes, he went downstairs, he put on a pot of coffee. While the coffee was brewing, he unloaded the dishwasher and then put the dirty dishes into the dishwasher and started it. He wanted to get his newspaper, so he went outside, he got his newspaper, but he realized he locked himself out of the front door. So he got the spare key out from underneath the mat, opened the front door, went inside, he sat down, had some coffee, read the newspaper. After a few minutes, he put his coffee cup in the sink, he packed himself a lunch in his lunchbox, and then he headed for the door to head for work. Peter was known as a very reliable employee who was also very punctual and rarely missed work. So when he didn't get to work that Monday morning, the court was a little bit confused. They called him to see if he was okay. He didn't pick up. So they dispatched a court officer to go make sure he was okay. And so the officer arrives at his house. He sees cars in the driveway. The front door's shut. He goes up. He knocks on the door. Nobody answers. He tries the handle of the front door. He realizes it's open. So he opens the door and he yells out, "Hey, I'm just looking for Peter." And the door hits something on the ground. Pokes his head inside and looks down, and there on the ground, the thing blocking the door, is Peter Porco's body. He's clearly deceased, and he clearly has a massive head wound. The court officer steps outside immediately, calls 911, local police show up, they go inside, and sure enough, Peter is dead. They go upstairs and they find his wife, Joan, in bed, also with a massive head wound, but she was still alive. Joan was rushed to a hospital where she underwent emergency surgery and then was put into a medically induced coma. Meanwhile, the police began their investigation into who could have done this. They quickly discovered that the home's alarm system had been smashed and a phone line, because there still was landlines at the time, had been cut from the outside, and a screen in one of the windows had been slashed that looked like the way someone climbed into the house. However, nothing appeared to have been stolen because police almost immediately found Peter's wallet with money inside of it still sitting in the house, as well as very expensive jewelry that belonged to Joan still sitting in the house. As they continued to search the house, they discovered a fireman's axe that belonged to the Porcos hidden inside of one of the bedroom closets, and it was very clear this was the murder weapon. The Porco sons had been away during this attack. John was on his submarine in Connecticut, and Chris was at the University of Rochester. And in fact, Chris found out about the attack on his parents when he saw a news report, because this story of this innocent, typical-seeming American couple in a quiet suburb getting struck down by some axe-wielding maniac had gone totally viral, and it was all over the news. And so Chris called the police to get more information about his parents' death. Here's the recording.
Hi, my name is Chris Porco. I was just called by the Times-Union saying that my parents were found dead this afternoon. I was wondering if you had any information for me.
Hey, Chris, whereabouts are you?
I'm at school in Rochester, New York.
Okay, you're in Rochester?
Okay, I think that's the dude with the strong killer face. Cause you too calm calling to find out that your parents are dead. You a bit too calm. You a bit too calm, my guy. Like,
Yes.
Okay, and you're hearing from the Times-Union?
Right.
Yeah,
right.
They said my parents were found, I guess, I don't know, they didn't say how or anything.
So you will be here probably, you're going to go right to Albany Med?
I don't know, I don't even know where my mom is, but...
Yeah, she is at Albany Med.
Okay, do you know her condition?
No, because I haven't talked to her. Let me give you my pager number.
As you can tell, Chris is extremely emotional. He's beside himself. He can barely...
Is that what y'all heard? Because maybe I'm just off, man. I'm not really the biggest people person. So maybe I read that wrong. Because he seems really calm about it. He seems really calm about it. I'm just saying.
Speak, he's so upset about what's happened to his parents. No, actually, he sounds as calm as if he's ordering a pizza. Because Chris Porco was actually a psychopath, and he was the one who attacked his parents with the axe. As it turns out, Chris was failing at school.
We know murders when we see them. Nah, man. You called like you was ordering a pizza. He sounded really emotional. No, he didn't. That nigga sounded like the killer. The fuck? It sounded like when he originally called. I was wondering, do you have any information on me? I mean, for me? Motherfucker, what? Nah, man. You was the killer. You were the killer. Yeah, exactly. Killer faces don't lie. We knew who the killer was when they showed us that family fucking picture. Period.
And taking out huge loans in his father's name by forging his signature. and his father found out about it. So Mr. and Mrs. Porco write their son a strongly worded email where they tell him this behavior has to stop, and they're very disappointed in him, but they love him and they will help him get back on his feet. Chris responded by driving home in the middle of the night, sneaking into his house and attacking his parents with an axe. While this case is already disturbing and horrific and tragic, it's what happens to Chris's father after the attack that makes it one of the most brutal cases of all time. After being struck 16 times in the head and laying unconsciously in his bed as his son snuck out of his house, Peter suddenly sat up and began his morning routine. He got dressed, he went to the bathroom, he shaved, he went downstairs, he made coffee, he did his chores, he went outside to get the newspaper, he got locked out, he got the key from under the mat, went back inside, he packed his own lunch. When he was finally ready to go, he headed for the door and then he collapsed and he died. Due to the severity of Peter's head wound, his brain was basically broken and it was unable to recognize he had been gravely injured. So in his final moments, he believed
16 times. Bro, could you imagine? You work your whole life. You get hit in the head 16 times with an axe. And the last thing you do before you die is you get ready to go to that piece of shit job. I mean, he must have loved his job. He must have, kudos. Damn, that's sad. Man. Bruh. He said he shaved. So was you just sitting there shaving, just drip leaking, my guy? Because, I mean, it's a head wound. They walked in, they saw this is a head wound. So how often were you wiping blood from your face as you made your coffee and all this shit? That's crazy. That's crazy. Whoa.
It was just a typical Monday morning going about his work routine, when in reality, he had a gaping head wound and he was basically dead after the 16th blow to his head. One of the more surprising and heart-wrenching details of this case is that Joan Porco, she did survive the attack. And after she came out of that medically induced coma, she said she forgot all the details of the attack, even though when she was discovered in her bed, she did indicate that Chris, her son, was the attacker. Nonetheless, she got together $250,000 to post Chris's bail, and she allowed him to come stay with her during his trial. And the two attended the trial together, walking into the courthouse hand in hand. Chris was very quickly found guilty of killing his father and attempting to kill his mother, and he was sentenced to 50 years to life in prison.
Y'all heard that shit, right? She survived. And then she posted his bail and let him come stay with her until his trial was up. You didn't have no friends to be like, look at your face. Look at your... Sweetie, I know you love the boy, but this ain't no love like a mother's love, bro. That's all I can say. But to me, I know niggas that jumped at their mom and still can't see them without their mom putting hands on them. This is... the caucasity. The caucasity. Oh, Lord, man. What Tony Baker say? The hemoglobin. Man, this pigmentless situation that we are watching unfold right now. Let's finish it out.
Despite the verdict, Joan Porco still speaks to Christopher over the phone and frequently visits him in prison. It's unclear if she still believes he is innocent. So that's going to do it, guys. If you found the secret in today's episode, let us know in the comments what it is and where you found it.
And you know what? Now I sound dumb because it was the head wound. She doesn't remember any of it. You wouldn't be able to believe that your kid did it. And if your kid says, I didn't do it, Mom, I swear I didn't do it. I swear I didn't do it. I swear I didn't do it. Crying, you more than likely gonna believe your child. Okay, so I take back some of it. But once I looked at my face, I feel like, y'all let me know what y'all thought. Y'all let me know what y'all thought. I don't know.
The timestamp, and if you're the first to do that, we'll pin you at the top of the comments section. If you enjoyed today's video and you haven't done this already, please offer to take the like button.
Hey man, so that was top 3 stories that sound fake but are 100% real, part 1. I'm gonna do part 2 and part 3 on this stream. If you see it on the channel and you want me to do other ones, you have any suggestions, go ahead, let me know. I'm your skinny deficient homie Chubbington III. What we just heard was crazy. I love y'all. I hope y'all like this. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, man. We out. That was weird. Oh, man, that's crazy. That's crazy. What's this one?
Sometimes the truth.
So we're going to do part 2 here in a minute. Bruh. That's bonkers, dog. That's bonkers. To me, that's absolutely crazy. I can't believe that. Check some things. I don't know. What you think, Crook? Because that seems like some off-the-wall stuff to me. We knew who the killer was, though. We knew immediately who the killer was. We knew. And that's the thing, man. It was like, pfft, yeah, he did it. He did it. We called that from Jump Street. I can't believe that, though. That's crazy. I don't know, man. That's interesting. The music that he did with that was real good. That shit was kind of creepy. Honestly, truthfully. Like, that was kind of creepy. I liked it. It was the good kind of creepy. I'll probably look all crazy doing this. Get some stuff out. No, I ain't gonna mess up my Yu Yu Hakusho. Why am I part of so many private groups? I do not understand. I kind of want to take a break from this second one and get a quick reaction into Dax, honestly. But I probably have saved Dax for Friday. Having technical difficulties with this tobacco. All right, so let's get into number 2. I like this so far, honestly. It's pretty interesting. It's pretty interesting. All right, let's get this intro going. Welcome back to the channel, y'all. I hope y'all had a chance to check out the other video I uploaded. If you're here for the MrBallen reactions that we doing, this is top 3 stories that are real, or top 3 stories that sound fake but are 100% real. I'm pretty sure that's how it goes. But I'm Chubbington III, your skinny deficient homie. Welcome to Buff Chubb. If you like this type of content, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share. We are trying to grow. So I hope you enjoy, man. Without further ado, let's get into this, man. Buff Chubbians, we reacting. The top 3 stories that sound fake but are 100% real. Say what up to my Buff Chubbians in chat, too, by the way. We doing this on a live stream.
This is Stranger Than Fiction, and today we're going to look at 3 stories that demonstrate that. But before we get into today's stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right channel, because that's all we do, and we upload 3, 4, even 5 times every week. So if that's of interest to you, please remove all the raisins from the like button's raisin brand. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's stories. From 2000 to 2013, Cornelius Mike Anderson miraculously turned his life around. Growing up in a suburb of St. Louis, Missouri, Mike was a troubled young man that seemed destined for jail time. But something changed for him in the year 2000 when he was 23 years old. Suddenly, he wanted to make the most out of his life. So he distanced himself from his old friends and he moved to a different suburb outside of St. Louis called Webster Groves. There, he started a successful construction company. He got married, divorced, married again. He had 3 kids and became the father to a stepchild. He was very active in his community, volunteering countless hours at his church, as well as becoming a youth football coach. Anyone that met Mike after the year 2000 only had wonderful...
Hold on, I want to make sure that this is big enough for y'all. Because on the last video, if y'all saw the last video, you know, on story number 3, we called out the killer before they announced it was the killer. We knew. Like, yeah. So let's make sure y'all can see.
Things to say about him, but Mike had a big secret about his past that he was just hoping never saw the light of day. Back in 1999, when Mike was 23 years old, he robbed a Burger King outside of St. Louis at gunpoint. He was arrested in the year 2000, convicted of armed robbery, and sentenced to 13 years in prison. Shortly after his conviction, he was out on bail pending the outcome of his appeal. But when his appeal was denied in May of 2002, Mike was expecting to go back to jail. And so he asked his lawyer, you know, what are the next steps? Because I'm out on bail. Do I go to the jail? Do they come to get me? And his lawyer said, oh no, they'll issue a warrant for your arrest. They will come to your house and they will take you to jail. So Mike got his affairs in order and he waited to go to jail. But no one ever showed up. And so days turned into weeks, turned into years, and no one ever took Mike to jail. Because it would turn out the state had made a clerical error, and they believed Mike was already behind bars when he was actually just at his home. And in July of 2013, at the end of his original 13-year sentence, they went to go release him from prison. That's when they realized he had never been incarcerated. So 8 U.S. Marshals immediately...
Wow. So they didn't come get him. What you gonna do? You gonna turn yourself in? Come on. What you gonna do? I mean, you get nervous after a while, but it's like, fuck, man. I mean, they fucked up. How's that my fault? So they went to go release him on his release date, and he just wasn't there. Wow.
Went to his house and they arrested him and they brought him to jail, and there was this huge public outcry that it was totally unjust that you're arresting him now because it's the state's fault that they did not bring him to jail. It's not Mike's fault. And Mike used that opportunity to become a totally changed man. And so after a number of appeals and this very public petition of people trying to get Mike out of jail, a judge finally took a closer look at Mike's case. And it would take this judge only 10 minutes to come to the conclusion that Mike was in fact a changed man and should not have to serve the rest of his sentence. And so although Mike was held for 9 months after being rearrested, he was released, and today he is a free man.
Well, I mean, 9 months is way better than, what was it, 13 years? Bruh. Lord works in mysterious ways. Imagine if he would have still been just like a thug. Bruh, he would have went to jail. He would have went to prison for years. You lucky you changed your life around. Honestly, you lucky you changed your life around.
The Tromp family were by all accounts a normal, hardworking household. 51-year-old Mark Tromp and his wife, 53-year-old Kobe Tromp, had established a successful red currant farm and earth-moving business at their property in Sylvan, which is just outside of Melbourne. Their 3 adult children, which were 29-year-old Rihanna, 25-year-old Mitchell, and 22-year-old Ella, all lived and worked with them at the farm. But their seemingly ordinary lives would change forever on Monday, August 29th, 2016. That day, without any warning, the family dumped their passports, credit cards, and cell phones on the kitchen table and ran out the front door, leaving it unlocked. They hopped into Ella's car and drove north. 30 kilometers into their journey, and it was discovered that the son, Mitchell, still had his phone. And so the others yelled at him to throw it out the window. And so he did. He chucked his phone out the window. The family drove all day and night until they reached a motel in the New South Wales town of Bathurst, 800 kilometers away to the west of Sydney. The following morning, Mitchell decided he did not want to be a part of whatever it was they were doing, and so he abandoned his family and began heading home. The remaining 4 family members did not go after Mitchell. Instead, they just piled back in the car and drove east to a popular tourist destination called the...
They was like, if you want to go, go. Like, we on a mission. I wonder why they bounced out like that, though.
Genelin Caves. It was there that the 2 daughters, Rihanna and Ella, decided that they also did not want to be a part of whatever it was they were doing, and so they snuck away from their parents and stole a car and began heading home. The parents, after realizing their daughters had now left, did nothing. They did not go after them. The 2 sisters drove south to the town of Goulburn, where they called the police to report their parents missing. The story made its way into the media, where the family was initially ridiculed for getting lost in the first place and getting completely separated in an area they should know well. This is their country. It's not a remote area. They were near big established towns the entire time. It just didn't make sense. But when police went to the Tromp family farm back in Sylvan and they discovered the front door was unlocked, there were credit cards, passports, and phones on the table, suddenly it seemed like there was a lot more to this case than met the eye. And so as this strangeness came into focus in the media, people stopped ridiculing the family and began speculating what caused them to suddenly flee their house. Was it something in the water they were drinking? Was there chemicals on the farm that was screwing up their brain? Were they running from someone? Were they in debt? You know, what was it that caused this strange sudden departure? Back in Goulburn, after reporting their parents missing, Rihanna and Ella inexplicably separated at a gas station. Rihanna just climbed in the back of some utility truck, and Ella hopped in the stolen vehicle and started driving home. Later that night, Ella would become...
Bro, am I the only person that's having a hard time keeping a straight face when he says Rihanna and Ella? Because every time he says Rihanna and Ella, in my head, I go, under my umbrella, Ella, Ella, eh. Serious. I'm sorry. Serious. Under my... It's raining. Okay.
Become the first Tromp family member to be located by police when she arrived at the farm and police were waiting for her there. Mitchell would arrive back home the following morning after taking a series of trains to get there. Once Mitchell and Ella were reunited, they made a statement to the media outside of the family farm, and as you're looking at them, it's clear they're totally shell-shocked. They don't know what's happened, and they're trying to articulate why their family left in the first place and what they were doing and where they're going, and the best they could do was to say, well, there was a lot of pressure on our family, and it was building up, and these things are just difficult to explain, and I don't really know what we were doing. Mitchell would say that there was a belief that people were after them, there was some paranoia there, but that paranoia was predominantly held by their parents. While Mitchell and Ella were certainly in a state of shock, they did seem mentally stable. The same could not be said for their sister, Rihanna. She was discovered by the driver of the truck she had snuck into after he had driven over an hour away. He had pulled over to check on something. He had gone around the back and then had the life scared out of him when he saw Rihanna just sitting there in a what he called catatonic state. She didn't know her name. She didn't know where she was. She was just sitting.
Sad.
Rihanna was taken to the Goulburn Hospital where she was put into their psychiatric unit. As media interest grew, the parents, Mark and Kobe, got back in their car up at the Genelin Caves and drove south towards Melbourne. A day later, on Wednesday, the pair had driven 600 kilometers to the Victorian town of Wangaratta, where they too inexplicably separated. Kobe turned around and started heading north again by means which are still a mystery, and a day later was found 350 kilometers away in the town of Yas in a very agitated state. She was taken to a hospital there, but then transferred to the Goulburn psychiatric unit to be with her daughter, Rihanna. Mark stayed in Wangaratta, and he was there for several days, and during his time there, he was spotted by a young couple really aggressively tailgating them, and then he was spotted again on another day fleeing from the car he had been driving. Finally, on Saturday evening, all of the Tromp family members were accounted for when Mark was finally discovered sitting next to the road near the Wangaratta airport. He was questioned by police and then assessed by a mental health officer, and then was released into the custody of his brother, who was a police officer. And as they drove away, Mark turned around and flipped off the photographers that had converged on the spot. He later released a more contrite statement apologizing for the hurt and concern that were caused by these events, and he also paid respect to the police and the volunteers that went out looking for them. After the investigation, the police determined that nobody was chasing this family. They were not in any danger. The family had also not taken any drugs. They were not in debt. They were not involved in any sort of religious cult. And prior to this strange event, the family had no history of mental health issues. After the dust had settled and the Tromp family was just back at their farm going about their normal life, every media outlet wanted an interview with them to try to learn more about why this strange thing happened. But the family said, we're not doing interviews, we're not putting out any more statements, we just want to be left alone. And so as a result, all people could do was theorize. And the leading theory was that the Tromp family was suffering from something called folie à deux, which is a French term that means madness for two.
They were talking about that folie à deux stuff. So what happened was probably the dad already was paranoid, and then everyone else got paranoid because of it. You know what I mean? Like, just like he said before. That's crazy. I think this is interesting myself. I think this is interesting. Just that the paranoia can like grab hold of everybody like that.
What happens is one person who is delusional can pass that delusion on to other people. And this typically only happens in very close-knit families or in very tight romantic relationships. While it's unclear which of the Tromps became psychotic first, doctors say it is clear at some point they were in a cycle of reinforcing each other's delusions if this folie à deux theory is the right one. While the full reasons for why the Tromps went on this strange voyage will probably never be known, the police deemed it a family matter and did not press charges. In 2007, 35-year-old Ava Wisniewska was a member of the German national paragliding team. Over the previous 2 years, Ava had competed in 10 of the world's biggest paragliding competitions, and she had won 6 of them, making her the top female paraglider in the world. So coming into that year, Ava was very motivated to work extra hard to make sure she retained that title.
What is paragliding again? Paragliding is when they, no, that's base jumping. Paragliding is when they got like the kite thing, right? Oh, that's when you sit in it and some people got like the motor behind them and stuff. Okay. Y'all good? All right, we good. We good. All right, let's keep going. Let's keep going. This is interesting so far, man. Y'all let me know what y'all think down in the comments. You know, to my future viewers who end up checking this out. I'm curious what y'all think. That first one, that's just kind of crazy. Like, we just bounced. Whoever had the delusion, you fucked up your whole family. Like, truthfully, that's just what happened. That's crazy.
Title as world champion. On February 24th of that year, Ava was preparing her gear alongside 200 other paragliders on Mount Bora in New South Wales, Australia. This was Ava's last training opportunity before her first major competition of that year, which was scheduled for the next week. As they were getting ready to launch, one of the coaches walked in front of the group and made an announcement. He said storm clouds had been spotted to the north, but the forecast was a little bit ambiguous. It wasn't clear if the storm was going to move over their training area or not. So it was up to each of the paragliders if they still wanted to launch that day and risk the bad weather. Ava, who was really eager to get this training flight in, looked at the sky and saw that it was pretty gray, but decided that she was going to do it. Worst case scenario, she would have to cut it short. The rest of the German national team, they didn't want to take the risk, and so they stayed grounded that day. Ava took a little bit longer preparing her gear, so by the time she was lining up on the cliff, she was only one of a handful of people that remained. And so strapped into her glider, she took a good run forward and launched herself up into the air. On the ground, the rest of the German national team followed in a van to track her progress and checked in with her from time to time with their radio. The first part of Ava's journey was incredibly calm. She followed the ridgeline from Mount Bora for 12 miles until it ended. At that point, she entered into the skies over the vast savanna. As her GPS and tracking log ticked, tracking her progress, 2 large thunderstorm clouds appeared in front of her, one larger than the other. The vast majority of the other paragliders that had launched that day had launched ahead of Ava, and so when these clouds appeared, they had already passed that section, and so they didn't need to contend with the storm. As for Ava and the other 2 people she was with, which was an Austrian team member and a Chinese team member, they had a decision to make. They could either immediately ground their flight to avoid the storm, or they could attempt to dodge it. They chose the latter. They knew it was too dangerous to try to fly underneath these clouds because of something called updraft. At the beginning of storms, warm air is sucked up from the ground up into these clouds, and a paraglider, if they get caught in that, can get sucked up with the air in.
Thank you, Magic School Bus. The Magic School Bus is where I learned about updrafts.
To the storm. And so Ava and the other 2 paragliders began aggressively flying around the outside of these clouds when all of a sudden the storm completely changed. The big cloud overtook the small cloud, creating this 12-mile wide cumulonimbus cloud that now all 3 paragliders were stuck inside of. Any updraft is dangerous to a paraglider, but the updraft of a cumulonimbus cloud is famously dangerous, because it's extremely powerful and it lasts for over an hour. The Austrian man was able to pull down on one toggle, point his feet, and begin spiraling all the way out of the...
Hold on 1 second. Ugh, there we go. Set the mood a little bit better.
The grasp of this updraft, and he said he turned to look at the other 2 and he didn't see the Chinese man, but he did see Ava, and she was desperately trying to do what he was doing and spiral down, but she was clearly caught in the updraft, and he watched her get pulled up into the black cloud out of view. By the time the Austrian man hit the ground, he would say it had become the worst thunderstorm he had ever seen, with huge hail balls hitting the ground all around him. He took one more look up and he didn't see the Chinese man, he didn't see Ava anywhere, and he took off running for a barn to seek shelter. And when he was there, he pulled out his radio and he alerted the other teams of this emergency. Inside the cloud, Ava was hurtling up like a rocket. The storm was lifting her at a rate of 60 feet per second. There was nothing she could do to get out of this wind tunnel. Ava knew she was getting pulled towards the storm's eye in its vicious center because of the immense claps of thunder that just kept getting louder and louder, and it also kept getting darker and darker all around her. In fact, it was...
And can you imagine, like I don't know, I live in the Midwest, so our thunderstorms be pretty bad, but it's like sometimes when the thunder hits, it's like the whole house shakes. Can you imagine being in a paraglider, basically a swing on a parachute, basically a swing on a parachute, and you hear that boom, like, it's gotta be deafening loud. I'd shit myself. I'm gonna have to censor this later. I'm gonna have to censor a lot of this, but I'd shit myself. I'd shit myself. Yes, I would. Totally. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding? You wouldn't? You wouldn't? Let me know down. Let me know down in the comments, man. If you real and you know that you would, you'd shit yourself. Give me hashtag poo-poo pants in the comments. You know what I mean? If not, you just a sky warrior. You know what I mean? Hashtag sky warrior in the comments. But yeah, nah. It'd be like that time you tried Indian food for the very first time and nobody told you that, yes, it's spicy in your mouth, but it's even spicier coming out. You know what I mean? It's like 2 a.m. Taco Bell. You know they closing. They ain't making no more meat. You don't even trust the meat in the first place. But yeah. That's Yeah, that's a laxative smoothie. No way. There's no way. Boom! It's all gone. It's all gone. Yep, there you go. All right, at least I'm relaxed now to die.
Pitch black, except for the occasional flash of lightning that came very close to electrocuting her. As she desperately tried to keep her glider stable, she was able to place a radio call down to her team on the ground, but all she could say was, "I can't see anything," before it cut out. And at some point, Ava reached the eye of the storm where it's pitch black and the temperatures are freezing and hail balls the size of oranges are pelting her left and right. And the updraft kept pulling her higher and higher and higher until she passed out from a lack of oxygen. And at some point, this updraft actually shot her up and out of the cloud. And while this meant she was out of the storm, she was now in air that was 50 degrees below zero, which meant everything, her face, her gloves, her clothes, the wings of her glider, everything.
Negative 50 after you just got soaked by a thunderstorm. Oh my God. Ooh, that's cold. That's cold. Oh man, and you know, you thought it was warm, so they probably wearing shorts and stuff. Like, oh, that sucks.
Completely froze. And to make matters worse, at the altitude.
And then in my case, man, I'm gonna have boo-boo sickles. Dang. Should have been a Sky Warrior instead of hashtag poopy pants. All right, anyway.
Altitude she was at, there was almost no oxygen, and she did not have a breathing apparatus. So by all accounts, Ava should be dead. But somehow, she didn't die. She just kept floating around above this storm cloud for 45 minutes. And then something happened. The ice on one side of the glider broke off, causing it to collapse, throwing her into a deadly free fall, and she's not in control, she's still unconscious, and she starts barreling back towards the ground like gravity has been turned back on again, going straight through the storm all over again. And so through the storm, going at 90 feet per second, she clears the storm, and then right after getting out from underneath it, her glider miraculously just opens back up again. And the jerking motion of her suddenly stopping her free fall jolted her awake. And so she's looking around, totally confused as she's gradually regaining consciousness, and she's taking stock of where she is, and she's still in the storm cloud, but right at the bottom of it. But luckily, the updraft had stopped.
Bro, if there's ever been anybody who needed to use this, if there was ever anybody that needed to use this motto more than Drake, it's this woman. God's plan. That's all you can say. That's all you can say. That's God's plan. Drake, you need to have her in the video. Make sure everybody watch this video first so that they can get the whole backstory, but you should have God's plan. Bro, you... if you just heard what I heard, God's plan. All right, anyway.
Stopped. And so she was steady, and she was able to reach up and grab her toggles, and she was able to fly herself down to the ground and crash land, and then she curled into a ball, grabbed her radio, and she called her team. When they heard her voice, they could not believe she was alive, because the other paraglider that got sucked up by the updraft, the guy from the Chinese national team, he unfortunately was struck by lightning and was killed. And so they were anticipating finding out that Ava had been struck by lightning as well. But Ava had not just survived. When they brought her to the hospital, they discovered that virtually nothing was wrong with her. She had some pretty bad bruises and cuts from the hail, and she had a little bit of frostbite on her face, but it was treatable. And so the same day she was brought in, they discharged her. After leaving the hospital, she and her teammates went back to the launch site so she could collect her gear. And when they got there, she looked at her GPS, and the GPS had been tracking her entire flight the entire time she was up in that cloud.
That's crazy.
She showed her teammates what it said, and they literally couldn't believe it. The screen showed she had reached an altitude of 32,634 feet, which, to put this in perspective, is the same altitude you fly at inside of a commercial jet. So imagine being outside of your plane in the middle of a flight, and that's how high she was. Another reference point is she was approximately 4,000 feet higher than the summit of Mount Everest. No human being had ever been that high, unprotected, and lived to tell the tale. Until Ava. So that's going to do it, guys. If you found the secret in today's episode, let us know what it is in the comments.
That's crazy, man. Like, whoa. Hey, this is cool. This is cool, man. Hey, well, I'm Chubbington III, your skinny deficient homie, and I hope you enjoyed your higher education with me. Come back. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share. This is Buff Chubb, hashtag Buff Chubb. We're going to keep growing. We love y'all. If y'all like this type of content, let me know. Hey, we out, man. Higher education, higher learning, higher everything. That was Coco Bongo. All right, Robin, I know you were saying some stuff. Yeah, MrBallen is really cool, man. I've never really watched his videos. Let me see. He got struck by lightning twice? That's crazy. See, and I might do number 3.
Sometimes
now I'm getting into it. I might do number 3. I don't know. Might take a quick break and then come back and knock out a couple more. I'm not entirely sure yet. Let's see. What time is it? How long we been going? Only been about an hour. It's 10 o'clock for me. All right, y'all give me 1 second, y'all. I'll be right back. We gonna get into this. Ooh. Man, I messed my leg up somehow. Okay. Let's see. Ooh. Boom. And a boom. Let's see what everybody talking about. Tony Baker's voiceovers. We gonna do comedy stuff on Tuesdays, I'm thinking. Comedy's gonna be Tuesday. Tomorrow gonna be Thirsty Thursday. Buff gonna come through. Buff's supposed to come through, and we're gonna be checking out some TikToks that just make you thirsty. Okay, I understand. But for now, I do want to check out this next story for MrBallen because I want to get through these three. And then after that, we'll see where it goes. I might start a different stream. Before I do. Excuse me. Before I come back and do music, honestly. blogs, entertainment. Yeah. Because then we gonna check out science. I think I'm gonna save science for Monday or Sundays. Sundays or Mondays. It's gonna be Science Sunday. And then who is all up in here? That's a good question, Lynn. Right now it's just us rocking and chilling. That's okay though, man. Anybody who watches in the future, I still love y'all. So I'm thinking about doing another recording. I'm gonna call this Higher Learning. I don't know. What do you think of that, Lynn? You like the idea of calling this Higher Learning? Welcome to Higher Learning with Chubbington III, your skinny deficient homie. Higher learning, higher education, higher understanding. Elevate everything. Let's get ready to learn. You know, I mean, BYOC, bring your own cigarette. Trying to see, what should we do next? That is the question. Is it going to be just straight up? Is it going to be just straight up MrBallen? And should I do one of his other ones? This is the top 3 stories. I wouldn't mind checking out like a greatest of Tony Baker's and try not to laugh to it. This has been very interesting so far. But they're 30 minutes each. Oh man, I hope they get views. I really do. Cause I would really like to keep doing that on the channel. I really would. Just, you know, mix it up. Not just have music videos, but actually have other stuff too. I really hope that this does well. It will. This will do well. This is me manifesting this into being. I believe that this will do well. People are going to be laughing at some point. Hopefully soon. There will be a bunch of people in here chopping it up with us. Our buff, chubby, and army can only grow from here. You know what I mean? I believe in us. Oh, and by the way, if you're having a bad day, if you're having a bad week, if you're having a bad month, a bad hour, and you feel like you're alone, you are not alone. We are all here. And maybe not everybody got your back, but people are aware. You can do this. You can do this. You feel me? Just wanted to go ahead and put that out there. 1 second, y'all. For sure, man. Positivity. I was thinking about doing affirmations on the channel. But let's go ahead and get into this reaction. Okay. Yeah, welcome back to the channel, y'all. Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. I am Chubbington III, your skinny deficient homie. This is Buff Chubb, man. If you found your way here, you were meant to be here. We checking out MrBallen on the channel again today. This is, what is it? Stories, top 3 stories that sound 100% fake, or that sound fake but are 100% real, part 3. Now, I don't know if people have been liking this on the channel, but I hope you have. If you're new here, show some support. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share. We're on the road to 5K. without further ado, welcome to higher learning, y'all. Higher learning, higher understanding, higher everything. Let's get into it, man. MrBallen, this is the part 3 of this. If you haven't checked it out, I'm going to put a link in the description to the first 2 videos that I did for this. So go ahead and check that out. And the link to the original video is always in the comments. So without further ado, Buff Chubbians, let's react. Let's chill. Let's learn. Let's learn something.
Truth is stranger than fiction, and today we're going to look at 3 stories that demonstrate that. But before we get into those stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right channel, because that's all we do, and we upload 3, 4, even 5 times every week. So if that's of interest to you, please ask the like button if they'd like to play Mario Kart with you on your N64. When they say yes, have them come over and then force them to use the broken Mad Cat's controller.
Hey, I will say this about MrBallen. His asking to hit the like button, he clean with it. He clean with it. If you ain't checked him out, go check out his videos. Like, he be clean with it. I say that. That's what I'm hoping to get to on this channel. Really. Be able to, like, just off the top of my head, get them openings coming, something a little bit witty, keep y'all entertained. Anyway, let's go.
Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's stories. In October of 2002, Mark and his wife Kathy were on their way to a baby shower in Baltimore, Maryland that was being held for them by Kathy's family. It would be a 7-hour drive from their home in Ohio, so Mark and Kathy tried to get out the door as early as possible, but one thing led to another and they got a pretty late start. By midnight, they were only about an hour away from their final destination, but they both desperately needed a bathroom break. And so they pulled into a rest stop in Frederick County, Maryland, which is about an hour outside of Washington, D.C. The rest area parking lot was completely vacant except for one car, which was a dark blue late model 4-door sedan that was parked head in right in front of the bathroom. Mark and Kathy pulled into a spot that was a few over from the sedan. They got out, they walked up to the restroom. Mark was done first, so he waited outside of the women's restroom for his wife. As he waited, he turned around to face the sedan that initially, when he first pulled in the lot, he believed was empty. But now, as he's looking at it, he can clearly see there are 2 people in the front 2 seats. A middle-aged man who's sitting behind the steering wheel looking directly at Mark, and then next to this guy is a sleeping teenager. And immediately, Mark felt really creeped out by these 2 guys. I mean, they are in this random rest stop in the middle of the night. They're the only ones there, and this guy is just staring menacingly at Mark. And so Mark's doing his best not to be intimidated and to stand his ground and not act fazed by what's happening right in front of him. But in the back of his mind, he is just praying his wife comes out of that bathroom as soon as possible so they can get the heck out of here and away from these 2 creepy guys. Finally, his wife did come out. He grabbed her by the hand and without any explanation, rushed them back to their car, hopped in, locked the doors, turned it on, and began backing out. And as he did, he looked over at the sedan and he saw the guy behind the steering wheel, the middle-aged guy, was looking over at Mark with that same menacing look on his face. Mark also noticed there was something odd about the sedan's trunk. There was a fist-size hole right above the license plate where you would normally put the key inside of. So the whole scene was just totally bizarre, and after Mark and Kathy sped out and were back on the highway, Mark explained to Kathy that there were actually 2 people inside of that sedan, and they really creeped him out, and that's why he had grabbed her and rushed them back into the car. And so she agreed that was pretty creepy, but by the time the couple got to the baby shower in Baltimore, they had completely forgotten about their experience at the rest stop. The baby shower went well, and before long, Mark and Kathy were back home in Ohio. About a week later, the couple was watching TV in their home when a breaking...
Hey, bro, I'll say this. Kudos to Mark, because he's seen horror movies and he was like, not today. Nope. Not today. Nope. Come on. Come on. There's no time to explain. You ain't about the trip. Bro, he was like, we out. We out. We out. We out. We'll talk on the road. We out. Let's go.
News bulletin came across, and it showed a reporter who was standing at the exact same rest stop that they had stopped in on the way to Baltimore in Frederick County, Maryland, and behind them was the same late model sedan that they had seen parked at that rest stop when they had pulled in. The headline of this special news bulletin was "DC Snipers Caught." It would turn out that middle-aged man sitting in the driver's seat of the sedan staring at Mark was none other than John Allen Muhammad, and the guy next to him, the teenager who was sleeping, was Lee Boyd Malvo. These were the two men that were responsible for the highly coordinated 3-week-long attack that left 10 people dead in the Washington, D.C. area.
I remember hearing about that.
Fist-sized hole that Mark saw on the back of their trunk was what they used to shoot through because it allowed them to stay concealed in the trunk while they were shooting. Mohammed and Malvo had been using that particular rest stop in Frederick County as a place to hide out in between their killings. When Mark and Kathy pulled in next to them, they were only halfway through their killing spree. Mark believes the only reason he and his wife were not targeted is because the killers most likely were trying to keep this rest stop off the radar because it was their hiding spot, and so they wouldn't have risked an attack there. Although, ironically, they would ultimately be caught in that rest stop. Mohammed was executed by lethal injection in 2009, and Malvo is serving a life sentence.
Dang. Dang, man. Talk about a brush with death. Like, for real. That's crazy. That's all good. Thanks for stopping by, Robin. That's crazy.
In 1988, 35-year-old Ivan McGuire was an experienced skydiving instructor with over 700 jumps to his name. On April 5th of that year, he was working in North Carolina, and he was tasked with filming other instructors and their students after they jumped out of the plane. The way this worked is Ivan would go up in the plane with the instructor and their student, and Ivan would be the first to leap out of the plane. He would roll onto his back, and he would film upward towards the plane, and he would capture the student and instructor jumping out, and Ivan would continue to film them until they pulled their chutes, at which point he would pull his. Now, being 1988, the filming equipment that Ivan was using was much larger and more cumbersome than something you would use today. He had a voice-activated camera attached to his helmet, and then from there was a cord going to this big, heavy VHS deck that he kept in a backpack. But despite the nuisance of the equipment,
voice activation in the 80s?
Ivan went up with the first student and instructor and successfully filmed their jump. When he got back on the ground, Ivan went over to the riggers and he gave them his parachutes so they could pack it for him. And then Ivan went over to a bench and began fiddling with his camera equipment. It was clear he was frustrated with the way it was set up and he was making all sorts of adjustments. When it was time for Ivan's second jump of the day with a new instructor and new student, he was so preoccupied with fiddling with his camera that he forgot to grab his parachute. And so he ran over to the plane and he's about to get on and they say, "Hey, Ivan, you're not wearing a parachute." And he goes, "Oh my goodness, you're right." He runs back over, he gets his parachute, he loads back in the plane, he goes up to altitude, and then he jumps out, he films the instructor and student, it all goes great, he makes it to the ground, and his second jump is a success. And just like after the first jump of the day, Ivan takes off his parachute, he gives it to the riggers, and then he goes and sits down on a bench and continues to fidget and fiddle around with his camera equipment. When it was time for Ivan's third jump of the day with yet another new instructor and student, this time he grabbed his parachute, put all of his gear on, ran over to the plane, hopped on board, and he took off. Once they got up to their jumping altitude, which was 10,500 feet, Ivan turned on his camera, and the footage shows the instructor and the student kind of getting their gear together, sitting across from him in the plane. The jump master towards the front of the plane slides open the side door. Ivan, who's going to be the first one out, makes his way to the edge. He turns himself upside down, so he's sitting basically with his back outside of the plane. He makes sure the instructor and student are right on top of him, ready to jump out right afterwards. Once they're ready, Ivan falls out backwards and continues to film. You see the instructor and student jump out right afterwards. Ivan continues to film them as they go down. They're in free fall for a few seconds, and then you see the instructor and student pull their parachutes, at which time Ivan reaches back to pull his own, but he can't find it. For a few seconds he flails, and you can see his hands coming out in front of the camera, and he's trying to reach for his ripcord, and then he realizes what's happened. That parachute he grabbed before he loaded up in the plane was not a parachute. He grabbed his heavy backpack that had that big VHS deck in it, and when he put it on, he mistook it for the parachute. And so now, falling at terminal velocity with no way to stop himself, he begins yelling out, "Oh no, oh God, no!" And he keeps reaching back as if he's just gonna find this cord, but there's nothing there. And after a few agonizing seconds, you see the ground getting closer and closer and closer, and then it cuts out. Ivan's body was later found about 1.5 miles outside of the drop zone in the woods. His camera and videotape were severely damaged, but they were able to splice.
Bro, oh, worst fears come to life. Oh, God, I got a deathly fear of heights, man, but it's the fear of falling that really, I got a fear of falling. I have a fear of falling, like, and, man, then you got time to watch it come, like, that's scary. That's scary.
It together, and that's why we know what happened in his final moments. An investigation into his death showed the pilot made the same mistake Ivan did. When he saw Ivan with that backpack on, he assumed it was a parachute. And so ultimately, Ivan's death was ruled an accident. Fair warning, if you look into this case, you will almost certainly come across the actual footage of Ivan's final jump.
I'm cool on that. I'm cool on that. If somebody wants to go watch it, go watch it. Do not put a link to that in the description. No. I'm not with broadcasting a man's death. You feel me? If I do see that in the description, I will remove it immediately and block you. We're not playing that. If you want to go look it up on your own, go look it up on your own now. Yeah, I ain't judging you. Do you? But do not put that on in the comments here.
In 1980, Bobby Shafran was on his way up to Sullivan County Community College, which is 2 hours outside of New York City, to begin his freshman year. Even though he was from the area, he didn't know anybody that was going to this particular school, and so he was pretty nervous about it. Plus, he wasn't that popular in high school, and he had a hard time making friends. When he pulled into a parking spot at the school, he saw a sea of people getting out of their parents' cars and carrying boxes up to their dorm rooms. And so he took a deep breath, hopped out of his car, grabbed his backpack, and began walking across the lawn towards the dorm building. On his walk over, Bobby was surprised when he felt like all these random strangers on the lawn were looking at him like they knew him. And a couple people yelled out to him and said, "Hey, it's good to have you back here." And one girl actually ran up to him and kissed him on the cheek and said, "Oh my gosh, I'm so happy you're back." And Bobby said, "I think you got the wrong person. I don't know you." And she laughed and she just ran away. And so Bobby's totally bewildered by this because he doesn't know anybody, but everybody seems to know him. And so he walks up the steps and he goes inside the dorm building. And as he's walking down the hall, people are high-fiving him and patting him on the back. And then right as he's about to turn the corner towards his actual dorm room, someone down the hall behind him yells out, "Hey, Eddie, what's going on, man?" And Bobby knew whoever it was yelling at him. Because this whole situation had been so weird, he felt like this had to be a case of mistaken identity. And so Bobby turned around and he saw at the other end of the hall another student who he didn't know, clearly waving at him and yelling out, "Hey, Eddie, come here, what's going on, man?" And so Bobby walks up to him and says, "Hey, I'm not Eddie. I don't know what's going on, but everybody thinks I'm somebody that I'm not, but I'm not Eddie. Who's Eddie?" And the guy said, "Yeah, okay, Eddie, it's good to have you back here, man," and then walked off. And so Bobby's like, what is going on here? And so Bobby turns and he goes back up to his dorm room and he goes inside and he just shuts the door. And he's thinking, I just want to be left alone for a second because this is not right. This is not how a freshman who doesn't know anyone gets welcomed at any school or any place in the world. This is totally unusual. And just a couple of minutes after being inside of his dorm room, he hears a knock on the door. And Bobby's like, oh great, who is it now? Who is it that thinks I'm someone I'm not? So he opens the door and there's another student who he doesn't know who's standing there. And this guy, his face just drains of color and he starts shaking when he sees Bobby. And they're both looking at each other like, what's going on here? And the student says to Bobby, were you adopted? And Bobby said, yeah. And then the student said, is your birthday July 12th? And Bobby said, yeah. And so the student goes, okay, my name is Michael,
brother,
and I am best friends with a guy named Eddie Galland, and you are his clone. You have got to be his identical twin. At this point, to Bobby, this almost made sense, but it was so crazy to imagine having some identical twin he didn't know about. And so Bobby asked Michael if he could go meet Eddie, because he's got to be a student here. And Michael said, well, actually, Eddie decided not to come back to school this year. which is probably why everyone you talked to was so excited to see you, because they love Eddie and they thought you were him, and so they're psyched to have you back. After talking for a couple of minutes, Michael tells Bobby that they have to go call Eddie and they have to set up a meeting so that Bobby can meet Eddie and vice versa. And so Michael and Bobby run outside to a payphone booth, they hop inside, they're crammed in there, and they dial up Eddie. And as soon as Eddie answers, Bobby grabs the phone and just says, "Hey Eddie, my name's Bobby," and everybody...
Nobody's probably paying attention, but I love that movie that he took the picture from.
"Thinks I'm you." And then Eddie says, "Yeah, I've been getting a lot of calls about that too." And Bobby would later say that when he first heard Eddie's voice, he said it sounded like his own voice coming through the phone. And so ultimately, Eddie invited Bobby and Michael to come to his house so that Eddie and Bobby could see if it really was true that they were twins. And so Michael and Bobby hopped in Bobby's car and they sped 2 hours to Eddie's house. And when they got there, it was the middle of the night, and Eddie's house is the only house in this quiet suburb that has all the lights on. And so Michael and Bobby walk up the path towards the front door of Eddie's house, and right as Bobby is about to knock on the door, it flies open, and standing in front of Bobby is his exact clone. It's Eddie. And Eddie's looking back at Bobby and he can't believe what he's looking at. They are definitely identical twins, and they both immediately saw that. Michael would say after Bobby and Eddie just stared at each other for about a minute, they just started laughing. It was like they were total strangers, but at the same time, they had this connection immediately. They knew they were related, and they were laughing and they hugged and they just stared at each other. And Michael said anytime Bobby would tilt his head, Eddie would mimic it, and vice versa. It was like they were looking into a mirror. Shortly after, this story of these two long-lost brothers reconnecting found its way to Newsday, which was a prominent local newspaper in New York, and they decided they would look into it to see if it was really true or not. And so one of the editors had a junior reporter fly out and actually see Bobby and Eddie face to face and see if it was really true that they were in fact identical twins. And as soon as this reporter saw them, they knew immediately that, yep, they're related. And so Newsday printed this totally heartwarming fairy tale story about these two long-lost brothers reconnected after all these years just because of a chance encounter in college. And everybody loved it. But this is where the story went from amazing to truly unbelievable. Friends of another young man living in the New York area named David Kelman began telling David that he had to check out this Newsday article about these long-lost twins because these two twins look exactly like David. Specifically, they said you gotta look at these guys' hands. They are just like yours, David. David was known for having these enormous hands, and a lot of the pictures of Bobby and Eddie in the news showed their hands, and they too were enormous. And so David finally picked up a newspaper and looked at a picture of Bobby and Eddie, and sure enough, he was shocked. They looked exactly like him. And then when he read the article, it showed their birthday was July 12th, the same as his, and they were born at the same hospital he was born at. And so he's thinking, these are too many coincidences. They have to be my brothers. And so David called Eddie's home phone number, and Eddie's mother picked up and she asked who was calling.
Could you imagine that, man? You meet your long-lost twin, and then you find out that it's not just a twin. You also have another brother who was adopted, who found you guys through the newspaper article. That's crazy.
And David said, "Hi, my name is David Kelman. I was born July 12th, 1961, and I'm looking at a newspaper article of two identical twins that look just like me, and one of them is your son. I think I'm the missing third twin." After hearing this, Eddie's mom apparently dropped the phone and yelled out, "They're coming out of the woodwork." So Eddie and Bobby went to David's house, and as soon as they walked in and saw David, they knew right away he was one of them. He was the third twin. And apparently, within minutes of meeting each other, they were wrestling and laughing hysterically on the ground. It was like, even though they were strangers, they somehow already knew each other and had an instant connection. David's family members that witnessed this first interaction said it was the most incredible thing they had ever seen, that it was just so wonderful to see these long-lost siblings finally reconnected after all these years. Shortly after David realized he was the third missing twin, Newsday did another story talking about how there was actually 3 missing twins that had all been reconnected. And once again, it was just this incredible Cinderella story, and now this story went all over the world. They were on the cover of every magazine, every newspaper, they were on every talk show, and everybody had the same question. What similarities did they discover? And they would say, well, we all wrestled in junior high school and high school. We all smoked the same cigarettes. We like the same food. We had the same taste in women. And on talk shows, when they would answer these questions, it was immediately clear that they all shared the same mannerisms. And on the show, they would routinely interrupt each other and finish each other's sentences. It really was like they were the exact same person, despite having been raised completely separate from one another. The boys loved the attention they were getting. They had become international rock stars overnight, and all three of them were immediately so close. They were best friends right away. They moved into an apartment together. They went out partying. They met Madonna. It was just this incredible time in their lives. And so they weren't asking questions about why they had been separated in the first place. But their parents were asking a lot of questions because they had not been told by the adoption agency that the boy they were adopting actually had two identical siblings. They had no idea. So the boy's adoptive parents reached out to the adoption agency, which was Louise Wise Services. It's based in New York, very prestigious. Basically, the most powerful and wealthy people in New York use this adoption agency if they're going to adopt. And so the parents reached out to them and asked for a meeting so they could get some answers as to why their kids have been separated.
So the parents must have been wealthy parents. You know what I mean? He's saying that the most prestigious people use it, then it had to be wealthy parents.
And so the parents go to New York, they go into this meeting room with the top brass of Louise Wise Services, and they say, you know, did you separate our sons at birth on purpose? And one of the executives said, yes, we did, because it's really hard to place 3 children into one home. At which point, David's adoptive father lashed out and said, that's absolute BS. If you had told me he had 2 identical siblings, I would have taken all 3. But the agency stood by their decision and said, that's the only reason it happened, and so sorry, that's all we can tell you. And so the parents were very frustrated and felt like there was much more to the story. And in fact, they felt like the agency was actually lying to them about why they had separated their sons in the first place. But they couldn't get any more information, so they left the agency. And right when they got outside, Bobby's father realized he had left his umbrella inside of the meeting room. And so he turned around, went back inside, walked down the hall quietly so he didn't want to disturb anyone. Then he opened the door to the meeting room and he reached in to get his umbrella, and he looked inside and he saw the people he had just met with from Louise Wise Services had just opened a bottle of champagne, and they were laughing and smiling, and they were clearly toasting each other on a job well done. And even though Bobby's father did not go in there and confront them about what they were celebrating, he got the sense that they were celebrating having dodged a bullet, that they clearly had just lied to the families of these 3 triplets and they'd gotten away with it. And so between the parents' general sense that the agency was clearly hiding something, and then Bobby discovering this champagne toast as soon as they left, the parents decided they needed to get in touch with some lawyers to help them get to the bottom of why their sons had been separated. And so initially, a number of really prestigious law firms in New York were excited to take this case. But shortly after, they all contacted the families to say, well, actually, there's a conflict and we can't do it anymore. And the parents believed this was because the adoption agency, Louise Wise Services, and some of their more prominent and powerful clients were pressuring the lawyers not to dig into this, that clearly there was some secret that they did not want uncovered. And so unfortunately, the parents hit a dead end and didn't know where else to turn to try to get more information. And so over time, they kind of just accepted that this is just the way it is. And as for their sons, they didn't really care that much because the way they looked at it, at least they had each other now. And so over the years, the boys continued to stay really close. They started families of their own and had lots of family get-togethers. It was just a really happy time in all of their lives. And at some point, the boys actually went into business together and opened their own restaurant in New York called Triplets. And the first year, it was extremely successful, did over $1 million in revenue. But in the second year, the brothers started to fight with each other about how to run the restaurant. And in many ways, this was their first major conflict. They hadn't grown up together. They had never really fought. And so now they're fighting over money and how to run the business. And it got really bad really quick, and they just could not come to any sort of compromise. And so at some point, Bobby left the business. He said, I don't want to do this with you guys anymore. And apparently his departure just completely ruined the dynamic of the 3 brothers. Eddie was the most affected by this fracture in their relationships. All he wanted was for his brothers to be really close and for their families to spend time together. And now all of that was in jeopardy. And so Eddie started showing signs of severe depression and was ultimately hospitalized for 3 weeks. And then shortly after getting out of the hospital, he took his own life. This was beyond devastating for the 2 brothers and the rest of their family. Around this time, a journalist named Lawrence Wright, who had always had a fascination with identical twins, found an obscure scientific article called Psychoanalytic Study of the Child. It detailed a New York-based study about identical twins that were intentionally separated at birth and then given to different adoptive families to be studied, although it wasn't clear what they were actually studying or why they needed identical twins to do this research. In this article, Lawrence discovered all the babies that had been used in the study came from the same adoption agency, the same one the triplets had come from, the Louise Wise Services in New York. And so Lawrence called Bobby and told him that based on this article, it seems like...
Now, I'm not one for conspiracy. That's my boy Buff. He the conspiracy guy. But me, myself, I'm thinking about this. It is a big time adoption agency. They provide services to the wealthy and, what was the word they used? Prominent, of society. You're separating children at birth and you're studying. My brain immediately goes to clones. He started saying clones, and I feel like that might have been a giveaway. My brain is immediately going to clones. I don't know. Y'all tell me if I sound crazy down in the comments.
He and his brothers were used in a scientific study. Bobby and David were totally furious. They felt like they'd been treated like lab rats. They also wondered if their being separated at birth had a negative impact on their mental health, and that might have contributed to Eddie's depression and untimely death. Lawrence wound up writing an article about this twin study he had discovered, and after he published it, another set of twins found out they had been a part of the study and discovered themselves. These two women were also struggling with depression, furthering the idea that the study could have led to irreparable harm to their subjects' mental well-being. At this point, David and Robbie did not expect anybody to be held accountable for this study. Instead, they just hoped to find out why it was done and what they were testing for and what the results were. And so they began working with Lawrence to try to get those answers. They contacted Louise Wise Services, who did admit that yes, actually this was part of a study, but they didn't give any information about what the results were or why they did it. And so they did some digging and they discovered the guy in charge of the actual scientific study was this doctor named Peter Neubauer, who was this very well-known psychologist in New York. And so Lawrence managed to get an interview with this doctor, but the doctor basically said, I won't answer any of your questions and I won't give you any information about this study. And he never published his findings. Right before the doctor died in 2008, he made sure the entire study was put under seal inside of the Yale University archives so no one could access it until 2066, which has led many people to believe that the reason he set it so far out was to guarantee all of these subjects in this study would have died by the time it was made publicly available, protecting his own legacy and the people that were involved in this study. In the recent documentary called 3 Identical Strangers, Dr. Neubauer's personal assistant, a woman by the name of Natasha Josefowitz, she was interviewed and they asked her, can you shed any light on why this study was done, what they were testing for, and what the results were? And she would say that she was not actually part of the study. She was more on the periphery, but she was privy to what they were doing. And she said the point of the study was to finally put to bed whether it was nature or nurture that made the person who they ultimately become. Basically, are your surroundings the thing that ultimately makes you who you become? Or is it just your genetic makeup, that you're predestined to become a particular person independent of how you were raised? And she said the results were incredible, that basically it has nothing to do with nurture. It's all about your genetic makeup, that we unconsciously trend towards specific behaviors and decisions, but we believe it's...
I know this is a kind of serious moment, but thinking about what he just said, right? Like, my girlfriend is a white girl. Love her to death. Love her to death. She was adopted by a black family. She still does stuff that I just be like, there ain't no way that nurture won out when it came to you. He said with love and everlasting commitment. I'm just saying, man, like that's an interesting study. And yes, yeah, like it has nothing to do with your surroundings. It's you. Your parents can't be like, oh, I didn't raise you to be like me or da-da-da. Nah, the decisions you make, I believe, but your actual personality, your core of who you are, that's something that's just, you're born with it. You are you. No one can replace you. You are you. You know what I mean?
It's free will. We believe we're choosing to do certain things, but in reality, it's basically predetermined. And specifically, in the triplets case, Bobby was intentionally placed into a more affluent household where his father was a doctor and his mother was a lawyer. And so they were very well educated, and that was his upbringing. Eddie was placed into a more middle-class family with his father being a teacher and his mom being a stay-at-home mother. And David was put into a low-income household where they were all immigrants, English was a second language, and they just had this very small shop that they had.
That's messed
And Natasha
up.
said this study demonstrated that despite these boys being put into different socioeconomic levels, it had almost no impact on who they ultimately became. She said she doesn't know why the study wasn't published, but she hopes someday it will be. Also, in this documentary, a doctor named Lawrence Perlman, who was actually one of the researchers in the study that would actually make house visits to each of the boys' houses as they were growing up under the false pretext that they were there as part of routine follow-up for the adoption agency. And he went on record and said that the study was not just about the effects of socioeconomic class, it was really about the effects of different styles of parenting. He said in the triplets case, each of the boys have been placed into their respective households after that household had already adopted another child. And that first child they adopted effectively became the guinea pig for this study, where scientists would come in and they would study this child under the false pretext that they were there just following up for the adoption agency, but really they were creating a baseline of how do these parents parent. And then once that baseline was established, then the triplets were sent into their respective homes with the researchers knowing full well how they were each going to be brought up, with the adoptive father being the X factor. Bobby's father, who was a doctor, was rarely around, but he was devoted and loving to his son. David's father, who was the shop owner, was around all the time and adored his son and loved him unconditionally. Eddie's father was a teacher who was around a fair amount, but when he was very strict and rough with Eddie and quick to discipline him and rarely showed any affection for him. And while Dr. Perlman does not come out and say that Eddie's relationship with his father probably had an effect on him becoming depressed and ultimately taking his life, there are many other people close to this case that believe that's exactly what it was. That David and Bobby had a stable, healthy upbringing and Eddie did not. And so when he was faced with the crisis of the brothers separating, Eddie couldn't handle it. These same people refute what Natasha said about the findings of the study that we're all genetically predisposed to
well, I mean, you got to think about it from his point of view. You know, you're saying that he came from a household that was strict and whatnot, and you know, you don't get affection from your parental figure, and then you meet your brothers, extensions of you, basically people who know you already, even though you don't know that they know you. And it's crazy. You have this bond, and then this bond is ripped away. I mean, human beings can only take so much, you know what I mean? But I tell everybody, keep fighting, get help, talk to somebody. Do not be afraid to talk to somebody. And reach out, man. That's crazy.
Become a particular person, they say if that was the case, then why haven't David and Bobby taken their lives? But ultimately, because the study was never published, we won't know for sure why it was done, what they studied, and what the conclusions were. All we have is speculation and second and third hand information. But what we do know for sure is these surviving triplets and their families are furious that this study was done. They feel like it ruined their lives. Following the release of the documentary, Three Identical Strangers, Bobby and David were actually granted early access to the study that was sealed inside of Yale University. And when they looked at it, they were expecting to be blown away with the results, but it turned out it was over 10,000 pages of very technical information, and much of it was heavily redacted, so they couldn't even read most of it. They were not able to deduce what the purpose of the study was in the first place or what it accomplished. It was just all very ambiguous. This study was ultimately shut down permanently in 1980, the same year the triplets discovered themselves. As for the adoption agency, Louise Wise Services, and all the scientists and researchers involved in this study, none of them were held accountable for their role in this totally unethical study.
That's
and so
crazy.
basically everything was swept under the rug. And so Bobby, David, and all of the family members of the triplets were just left with a whole bunch of questions and not a lot of answers. So that's going to do it, guys. If you found the secret in today's episode, let us know.
See, and that lets you know, man, like there's so much more going on behind the scenes that we don't know about. That was crazy. I had to stand up towards the end. Yo, man. Hey, I'm your skinny deficient homie, Chubbington the Third. And man, I hope y'all enjoyed yourself, man. This was higher learning, higher education, higher everything. And I don't know where we're going to keep going with this, but y'all let me know what y'all think down up in the comments, man. I love y'all. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share. Help us grow. And have an extra taco on me. We out. Yeah. That was pretty crazy. I cannot sit down anymore. Okay. I have done what I can today, and it's been fun, man. I'll catch you guys on the flip side. I hope everybody has a great day, and I'm hoping to be back tomorrow. Try and start making this a little daily thing. So y'all have a good night, man. Love y'all. We out.